In the last lesson, I showed you how you can create multidimensional arrays by actually creating the structure in memory, and then using some pointer magic you can create a new three-dimensional array, set the data, and then you can start to use the bracket syntax in order to reference the specific elements of that array. Now, as you can imagine, this is a very impractical way of doing things. No one is going to create the memory structure of their array. Instead, what you're going to do is you're going to create the array like this, and then you'll set the individual array elements. So let me show you how you would go ahead and do that. We'll start with a blank program, and here you can see a representation of what we want the final result to look like. So first of all, we're going to create our array. It's going to consist of three sets of 6 characters. Now, in order to set the first word, which is the word 1 starting at memory position 0, we need a function that works like this. We give the memory address along with the string of text, and then it will copy the string of text to that memory address. It turns out that C has a built-in function called strcpy, which is short for string copy. The way string copy works is you simply give it a memory address. In this case, we'll give it the memory address our array, which will of course correspond to the very first byte of the array. And then you give it the string of text you want to copy to that exact memory location. In this case, we'll give it simply the string of text 1. Now, just as the printf function has a specific header file that you must include, which is stdio.h, strcpy has a header as well, which is string.h. So whenever you want to use the strcpy function, you'll want to include string.h. Now, in the interest of being thorough, I need to point out that the strcpy function is largely considered deprecated, meaning it's considered out of date. You typically will not use this function in a real-world application. And later on I'll show you alternative functions you can use, but because right now you are learning C and you're learning how copying data works, I think it's very useful for you to understand how this function works. So again, you give it the memory address and the string of text, and here's what's going to happen. Let's imagine that we don't have anything set in this data. As soon as you run this function, we're going to locate this position in memory, and we're going to start copying the data 1 character at a time, just like this. And keep in mind that I'm representing the null character as an underscore just to make this easier to read. So after we've done that, we can immediately call the printf function and give it the memory address where our string of text begins. And if we run this program, you'll see that it worked correctly. Now, remember that in the previous lessons I talked about the bracket syntax and how you can locate specific elements. And if we wanted to locate that specific word in a prior lesson, we might have written something like this. And keep in mind that this will work too. Whenever you're using the bracket syntax, it's simply going to result in a specific memory address. So if it's offset 0, then it doesn't really matter whether you give just the name of the array or you give the specific index like we just did. It's still going to correspond to memory position 0, because in effect what's going to happen is this is going to be expanded into this, which is still the same thing because adding 0 does not change anything, and so it's still the same memory address. Alright, so we just set the word 1. Now if we want to set the word 2, we can do this. We can say strcpy. Now we need to give it the memory address where the 2 will begin. And we can do it like this. We can say our array 0, 1, 2. Now keep in mind our first word is the same thing as if we had done this. So now if we run this program, you'll see that it prints the word 1 because we're telling it set 0, word 0. And now if I change this from a 0 to a 1, and we run it again, you'll see that it prints the word 2. When this line of code executed, here's what's happening. We are sending a specific memory address to the strcpy function. That memory address is going to be whatever this is when it's converted to pointer offset syntax, which is going to look like this. You're going to have each word consists of 6 characters, so this is going to be times 6. And since there are 3 words, this is going to be times 18. Of course, the brackets are going to go away, and we're going to be left with something that looks like this. Well, actually, this. So we're starting with the specific memory address, which is here. Then we're adding, well, 0 times 18 is 0, so we're not adding anything, so we can ignore that. And then we're adding 6. So that will place us right here. And that's exactly where, in the previous lessons, the word 2 began. Notice that we're not setting anything here. Now we could. We could just simply do this, for example, and we can set those to a null character, but we don't need to. The reason we don't need to is that our bracket syntax can already locate the specific word we want, and we don't need to store any more data than we want to. Now you might be wondering, if we don't set these, what will they contain? And the answer is we simply don't know. When you allocate space in memory for something, it doesn't change the value of what is already there. It simply specifies that you're going to be using that space to store something. Now what happens if we try to store a word here that is so large that it actually fills all of this space? So in other words, what happens if we do something like this? What's going to happen is that as soon as this function is called, it's going to look up the memory address, which is of course going to be position 0, which is going to be here, and then it's going to start copying the characters, just like this. And keep in mind that the underscore is corresponding to a null character. So notice then that it is possible when using the strcpy function that you can copy too much. You're simply giving a memory address and what you want to copy to that memory address. So you have to be careful that you don't copy so much data that you accidentally overwrite something else that's important. There is a technical term for when you do that. That is called a buffer overflow. A buffer overflow is any time you copy more data than can fit inside of the space that you've allocated, which is called the buffer. In this case, we're saying that each word should consist of 6 characters, so we have to then be careful that we don't accidentally copy more than 6 characters, including the null termination character. So now let's go ahead and set all of the different words so that we have the string of text the way we want it. So this is our goal. We want to have this represented in memory. Of course, in reality, we don't care about the bytes that we're not going to look at. We just want to make sure that each word ends in a null termination character. So here's how we do it. We're going to copy the word 1 as the first word. Then 2, then 3. Now we're done with 3 words. We can see that if I run the printf function here for each of these words. One and 2. And when I run the program, you'll see that it shows that we have correctly set the first 3 sets of words. And then we just simply repeat the process for the other sets. So of course we'll have set 1, set 2, and here we're going to have capital versions, and here we're going to have lowercase versions. And there you go. And then if we want to demonstrate that this has worked, we can go ahead and simply print all 3 sets. Like so. And you can see first it's printing the version where the first word is capital, then where all of it's capital, and then where all of it is lowercase. Now if we want to, we could do something like this. Just to make a better looking output. Then if we run the program, you'll see the result. So there you go. In this lesson I've shown you how you can create a multi-dimensional array, and then using the strcpy or string copy function, you can copy strings of text to the specific memory addresses that correspond to the sets within the array that you want to initialize. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I hope you enjoyed this lesson.